Good morning. Oh, we're going to have a fun time today. Our reading today is from Psalm 27, verses 1 through 6. Listen to these words of confidence from one going through a hard time, yet whose trust was in God completely, to be there with them through it all, right to victory. God is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? God is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. One thing I ask of God, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in God's house all the days of my life, to gaze on God's beauty and to seek God in the temple. For in the day of trouble, God will keep me safe by shielding me and will set me high upon a rock. God will keep me safe by shielding me and will hide me in his sacred shelter and set me high upon a rock. Then my head will be exalted above the enemies who surround me. At God's sacred tent, I will shout for joy. I will sing and make music in thanksgiving.
Thank you, Kathy. Powerful reading. Thank you. So the great pastor William Sloane Coffin of Riverside, New York fame, wrote in a sermon one time, he said, quote, "There are three kinds of patriots, two bad, one good. The bad are the uncritical lovers and the loveless critics. Good patriots carry on a lover's quarrel with their country," end quote. I was thinking about Coffin's quote a lot this week as I studied the faith and activism and life and courage of a man I would like to lift up on this day in Black History Month and on a day when millions of people will gather around their television sets to watch a game in which this man played just a decade ago. Of course, the game I'm talking about is, as we've already talked, the Super Bowl, which airs tonight between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. And the man I'm talking about was the quarterback of the 49ers when they went to the Super Bowl in 2012. A man you all know for a variety of reasons, Colin Kaepernick. It's his story I want to explore today as we both celebrate Black History Month and get ready for the big game tonight. For he is someone that I personally have held in very high esteem, even when so much of the nation, including the NFL, turned their backs on him for his willingness to think beyond himself and his dreams and stand up, or rather kneel down, to raise awareness of oppression and ongoing racism. I know not everybody will agree with me. I've already had some very interesting conversations, but I consider this man a hero in the same light as Rosa Parks, whom we celebrated lavishly last week. Why? Well, hear me out. And then you can tell me why I'm wrong, though I don't think I am. I'm the foregone leading person on my own opinion. Right? Colin Kaepernick was born on November 3rd, 1987 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the son of a black father and a white mother who at 19 years old could scarcely take care of him. He was placed up for adoption and was eventually adopted by a couple in Milwaukee who soon moved the family to California. Colin grew up an incredibly athletically gifted child, playing several sports, football, beginning at age 8, and baseball soon after. His arm was so strong, in fact, that he quickly became a standout in both of those sports at a really young age. He threw a 94-mile-per-hour fastball as an elite pitcher as a young kid. Think about that, 94 miles per hour as a youngster. That's amazing. His arm was so strong, in fact, that his dreams just couldn't be contained. But baseball could not hold his dreams. Even with that 94-mile-per-hour fastball, at the young age in 4th grade, he decided he wanted to go pursue football. He wrote, quote, "I hope to go to a good college in football and then go to the pros and play for the Niners or the Packers." Even if they aren't good, end quote. His dream was to play professional football, and nothing would derail him from that for now. So Cap was a star in high school football circles, but he garnered some detractors who worried about his size because he was 6'4", he's a tall dude, yet he was only 170 pounds. So he's pretty skinny. So he was passed over by bigger college football programs, but he caught the eye of the coaches at the University of Nevada, and they offered him a scholarship not to play quarterback, interestingly, but to play safety. But as fate would have it, early in his freshman year, the starting QB went down with an injury, and they called young Cap to step in, and he put on a dazzling performance, and he threw for 384 yards and 4 touchdowns. And you know what happened? He and Nevada, they never looked back, and Cap ended his college career as the first quarterback in Division I history to throw for 10,000 yards and rush for 4,000 more. First time ever. That's how good this guy was. And with those amazing stats, he was drafted by the Niners in the 2nd round by a favorite. It pains me to mention his name here today, but I'm gonna because I have a lot of respect for him. Jim Harbaugh. Come on, let's hear it, Michigan fans. Jim Harbaugh drafted Cap in the 2nd round, and in his 2nd year, he became the starting quarterback, like in college when the original starter went down, and he went on to dazzle everybody again, and he led his team in 2012 to the Super Bowl. They lost that game to the other Harbaugh brother, John Harbaugh, and the Baltimore Ravens, but the scene was set, and Colin Kaepernick was poised to go on to stardom. Nothing was going to stop him. Fast forward a couple of seasons that saw both highs and lows for Cap's playing career, as well as an injury that sidelined him for a bit, and we arrive at that fateful 2016 NFL season when all heck around him was about to break loose. And if you remember back, this was a particularly difficult time in our nation, especially when it came to the killing of black men and women at the hands of law enforcement, and in our politics as well, that was just seething with racism at the time, being stoked especially in the political arena. Now, things had been getting increasingly tense, very tense if you think back. In fact, as Cap was playing football, he saw the world exploding around him in violence against his black sisters and brothers. I want to recap just a bit. From 2014 to 2016, for example, Eric Garner, who said, "I can't breathe," was killed by police officers in New York. Michael Brown was shot to death in Ferguson, Missouri. Tamir Rice, 12 years old, was shot to death by police in Cleveland. Eric Harris was shot and killed by a police officer that meant to tase him but pulled the wrong weapon. Remember that one? She pulled her gun and she shot him in the back instead. Freddie Gray was arrested and later found unconscious in the police station with his spinal cord nearly severed. He died. 6 police officers were tried, but they were not convicted. Alton Sterling was shot and killed in Baton Rouge. No officers held accountable. And finally, just outside of my hometown, remember it well, Minneapolis, Philando Castile, who was reaching for his concealed carry permit. When he was pulled over during a traffic stop, he too was shot and killed by the responding officer. His shocked girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter were right there in the car with him as he died. So there are many others we could go into, but I think you get the point. Things were not going so well, especially when it came to being a young black man or woman in our nation, in our communities in that time. The victims of the police violence, and this is well before, several years before George Floyd, they were all black. The officers were rarely charged, and yet the settlements to the families were huge. They were big. And you know what that means? They just wanted to sweep it under the rug. Pay the family out, go away. Don't ruffle any feathers because no one's going to get charged and no one's going to be held accountable. But it just kept happening again and again. And the racist policies, they went unchecked. And one man took particular notice, and he decided he had a platform. He had a platform, and he decided to make a stand by refusing to stand as a protest against it all. And so on August 16, 2016, during a preseason game for the Niners, Colin Kaepernick decided someone had to speak about what was happening. And he knew, again, he had a platform and it was going to be him. He couldn't take it anymore, seeing all this violence. So when the national anthem was played, and the fans, players, coaches, everybody, did what they do, they stood up. Cap sat on the bench. He decided just to keep sitting on the bench. It wasn't noticed by many people this first week, except for a few. And one reporter got to him afterwards, and Cap told him, "I'm not going to stand up to show pride of a flag for a country that oppresses black people and people of color. To me, this is bigger than football, and it would be selfish on my part to look the other way," end quote. Now things were about to change. As week one rolled into week 2, and then into week 3, people began to take notice. One of those people was a former NFL player in Green Beret named Nate Boyer, who decided to write an open letter explaining his views on Cap sitting during the anthem and talk about how he felt as a veteran, how it made him feel. And he penned this letter, and he was pretty upset. He was upset. It's right on the screen up there, actually, on the lower right-hand side as I'm looking. And then shortly after his letter was published, he got a call. It was Colin Kaepernick, who wanted to meet and talk. So they met at a team hotel lobby, and they talked, and they listened honestly with one another, a rare commodity in these days, right? At some point during this conversation, as Boyer really listened to Kaepernick and heard how committed he was to his cause, how painful this was to him, how real this was to him, Boyer made a suggestion to Cap. He said, "Don't sit. Why don't you kneel?" In an NPR interview 2 years later, Boyer said, "In my opinion and in my experience, kneeling has never been in our history really seen as a disrespectful act." He said, people kneel when they get knighted. Who hasn't done that? Come on. You kneel to propose to your wife. You take a kneel to pray. And soldiers often take a knee in front of a fallen brother's grave to pay respect. So I thought, if anything besides standing, that was the most respectful. He ended with, "But of course, that's just my opinion," end quote. So Cap apparently agreed, and the next weekend, he and 2 of his fellow teammates knelt on the field when it came time for the anthem. And Boyer, you see him right there, stood at his side. And what Kaepernick tried to make clear, and Boyer understood as well, was that Cap was not kneeling to disrespect veterans. He was not. He was not kneeling to disrespect the flag. It was not to disrespect the memories of fallen soldiers or to disrespect any form of patriotism. This was to protest a nation that was in a lot of trouble, a lot of hurt. It had fallen yet again, like it hadn't ended, into the vicious cycle of racism and violence that just wasn't being addressed. Someone had to do something. So this was to protest the ways of a nation that was not living up to its promise that all people were entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This was to say enough. And much like Rosa Parks taking a seat 60 years earlier, Cap had just had enough. And going back to the quote I opened the sermon with, there are 3 kinds of patriots, 2 bad, 1 good. The bad are the uncritical lovers and the loveless critics. Good patriots carry on a lover's quarrel with their country. Colin Kaepernick, in my humble opinion, is a good patriot. who, led by a profound faith in which God was always with him, as worded in Psalm 27 that he has tattooed on his body, one of the two scriptures he has tattooed on his body, because he was a man of very strong faith. He was and still is to this day. He's carrying on that lover's quarrel with his country, and he's guided by his faith in a God of the oppressed. He advocated and continues to advocate for those who often have no voice. He uses his platform, his voice, to speak for those who have none. And though the country is slow to get there, and we have a long way to go, I, for one, believe wholeheartedly that someday Colin Kaepernick will take his place on the mantle of the great advocates for human rights. And he will be seen as one of the great change makers in American and world history. In fact, I was thinking about it this week as I was writing this and working on this. He stands in line with the great prophets of old who leveled sharp critiques against their nation of Israel time and again for instances of injustice and oppression. The prophets Micah and Hosea and Amos and Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel, they all spoke harsh words to their nations in times of injustice. Yet we celebrate them today, right, as prophetic voices. I mean, what was it Amos said that God told him? He said, I hate, this is to the Israelites, I despise your feasts. I despise your feasts. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Take away from me the noise of your songs, the melody of your harps. I will not listen. But let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Whew, sharp critique, right? Or take the hero of American history, someone else that we should lift up this month, Frederick Douglass, who scathed America, saying, America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Go search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, travel through South America, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of everyday practices of this nation. And you will say with me that the revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without rival. He said that because slavery was such an accepted institution. Douglass was taking America to account for slavery with harsh condemning rhetoric. And yet we hold him up as a hero today, and we should. I contend the same will happen with Cap. It's just a matter of time, for everything he has done has been guided, again, by that unwavering faith in the love and fairness of God and in the right for all people to breathe free of oppression and violence and fear, especially from our law enforcement. He's trying to make America better. That's what he was trying to do, and in a more just place by raising awareness like those others of its sins. And he's not, as he was called, a son of a bitch. That's what he was called by a very prominent person. He's not a traitor, as others called him. He's not anti-American, far from it. He's a lover in the midst of a quarrel with the country he loves and that he respects and that he calls home. And he's a hero, and he's a pioneer and visionary, and the kind of that the world all too often loves to label as dangerous. All right, so I could speak on Colin Kaepernick all day long, I've realized. I had to cut this off. I haven't even gotten to the NFL's apology to him, the Nike campaign in 2018 that celebrated him with something, even if it means sacrificing everything, and all the amazing stuff he's doing today to elevate kids, to bring kids out of poverty, and to get them into college, and to make sure they have food and education and things, and to continue to raise awareness of oppression and racism. I haven't gotten to any of that. He's still at it to this day. He's not in the NFL, if you notice that, because he was booted out forever. So I was going to keep going, but then I realized that you're all going to be smelling pulled pork and jambalaya and beans and all the good stuff. So here's what I have decided to do. This is part one of this sermon. Next week, I never got applause for a longer sermon before. This is part one. Next week will be part two, but with a different emphasis, both revolving around kneeling in two very different ways of living out our faith. It dawned on me this week that we have right in front of us a living example of the differences, between two different ways of living the Christian life. Almost like we have Paul and James happening right in front of us. Paul, who advocated a very personal faith, by Tim Tebow, a good man. I'm not going to disparage Tim Tebow. He's a good man. He's done so much good. I love Tim Tebow. Don't be wrong, but I want to look at him for his personal faith. And then James, represented by Kaepernick. James was the brother of Jesus, who advocated for more of a justice-based approach, a works-based approach, if you will, to his faith. So I came across, and this isn't original to me, I came across this in a Washington Post article, and I couldn't get enough of it. It was just stuck with me all week long, so I want to go into that a little bit next week. And it's Tim Tebow and Colin Kaepernick, two stars kneeling, but very different responses, right? One was celebrated and lauded for his very personal faith on the field. The one, as we have seen, was driven right out of the league, never to play again. One was white, one was black. Might have noticed that too. But both representing different visions of what the call of the Christian life is. So given that next week is Lent, I thought this would be a fascinating way to look at the call of our faith in Lent. Is it inward looking and personal? Or is it outward looking and communal? Or is it both? We'll use these two to explore that on the first Sunday of Lent next week. I also next week want to do a sermon talk back. We obviously can't do it today because you're all going to be out there having fun. So I'm going to do a sermon talk back next week as well on this very topic, because I know this can be controversial. People have very strong feelings about this. I know that, and I want to hear them. I want to have you have an opportunity to talk about this as well. So we'll circle up next week after the service and do a talk back on these two sermons. So save your thoughts. You can share them with me afterwards. Love hearing your thoughts. But save some comments and think about this all week and bring some stuff next week to talk about. How do you feel about this? How do you feel when he kneels during the anthem? How does that make you feel? Someone's calling me. God's calling me right now. Nat, I'll call you back. So hang on to all of this week, my friends, because it's challenging, and I want to talk about it with you because I'm curious to know what you think. But what a great American to lift up on Black History Month. But for now, let's continue our service with our amazing choir and in a time of prayer. And then let's go out, my friends. Let's go out and enjoy the beauty of this day with a shared feast together, because it is beautiful. And there's a lot of you here, and we need to have a great sense of community today. So let's build that today, have fun, and we'll come back and regroup next week for part 2 of this sermon. I wish you a continued blessed Black History Month to you all. Happy Mardi Gras and happy Super Bowl Sunday. Amen, amen, amen.